This is a help video for the handout for lessons 6 and 7, which was polynomial long division and synthetic division. If you're watching this on YouTube and you're not one of my students, you would find a link in the description for this handout, so you could download it and print it yourself if you'd like. There are 12 problems on this handout, and the first 6, the directions say use long division, but I would not do that in cases where I could use synthetic division. And I see numbers 1 and 2. It is possible to use synthetic division on these because it's a linear factor and the coefficient of x is 1. So that's what I'm going to do on numbers 1 and 2. 3, 4, 5, and 6 will do long division, but all the rest of the problems we're going to use synthetic division. Okay, so this is number 1, and the first thing I want to do when I have a polynomial division problem is I want to look at both the divisor and the dividend and make sure that the exponents are in descending order, and also that I have a term for each exponent. So in other words, I have an x to the 4th, I have an x to the 3rd, x squared, and x to the 1st, and then I also have a constant. If I don't have anything in between the highest degree and the lowest degree, if I'm missing one of these terms, I need to be sure that I add a 0, x to the whatever, to serve as a placeholder. Same thing in my divisor. If this was an x squared and it said x squared plus 2, I would need a 0x to the 1st as a placeholder. So I have everything I need here. I'm going to go ahead and use synthetic division. And if you remember from our synthetic division lesson, when we have the factor listed for us, we need to use the root. So we need to set this up equal to 0 and then take that, solve for x, and then that number is going to be what goes over here in our little corner that we put here. So in other words, if it's a linear factor and its coefficient of 1 for the x, then just take the opposite of this number and put it over here in your little box. Okay, so then after we do that, we need to look at each coefficient of each of our terms in the divisor, and I'm sorry, the dividend. This is the divisor. This is the dividend. In the dividend, and we're going to list those coefficients in a horizontal line here. So my first coefficient of the x to the 4th is 1. My next coefficient is 12. My next one is 28, and so on. 11. And be sure you take that -8. If it's a minus, you want to use that minus as your negative symbol. Okay, so I've got all of my coefficients. I've got my x to the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st, and constant. So then I'm going to just draw a line under that whole thing. I'm always going to drop that first coefficient down underneath the line, and then what I'll do is I'll start multiplying my root times whatever's under that line. So I'm going to multiply -2 times 1. And then these two numbers, I'm going to combine them. So 12 minus 2 is 10. And then I'm going to just keep repeating that process until I get to the end. -2 times 10. Combine these. -2 times 8. Combine these. That's -5. -2 times -5 is 10, and combine these, and that is a 2. Okay, so then what I usually tell my students is go backwards, go from right to left here. I usually draw a little line here just so I know this is my remainder, okay? And when we have a remainder, we're going to write that in our answer as a numerator, and I'll show you in a minute how we do that. You should have watched the video on the actual lesson video already, so I'm going to go faster than this for the rest of them, but just wanted to kind of review a little bit. So this is my remainder, this is my constant term, this is my x term, and I can just go ahead and write that x there. This is my x squared, and this is my x cubed. So just go in order: remainder, constant, first power, second power, third power, and how many ever you have, just keep going, counting up. So here's my answer. X cubed, I don't need the 1. This is plus 10x squared plus 8x minus 5. And this is a positive 2, so I'm going to put a plus. And then the 2 is the remainder, so it goes in the numerator. And the denominator is my original divisor. So this is the answer. using synthetic division. We could have used long division, but synthetic division is so much simpler. All right, moving on to number 2. Number 2 is written as a fraction, but we know a fraction bar means divide, and this is our divisor. This is our dividend. Let's look and see if we have all of our exponents. We have a 3, a 2, a 1, and a constant, so we don't need any placeholders for this or the factor. So my root is a -5, and my coefficients, I'm going to list those. Don't forget this -21. Drop that 6 down and start multiplying and combining. This is -30. Combine these, that's a 2. This is going to be -10. That is a -6. -5 times -6 is 30. So I got a 9 there. This is my remainder, my constant, my x squared. So my answer looks like this. This is a +9, so it's going to be plus 9's in the numerator. The denominator is the original factor. So what this tells me is x plus 5 is not a factor of this. The way I would know it's a factor is if I got a 0 remainder. Okay, number 3, I'm going to check my dividend for 3, 2, 1 constant. It has everything. I don't need any placeholders. This is a 1 and a constant. It's linear, but the x coefficient needs to be a 1 to use synthetic division. So I need to use long division on this one. So I'm going to set this up just like I would long division with regular numbers. I'm just going to write this whole thing under here. So again, if you haven't watched the video lesson on long division, you'll want to go back and do that because I'm not going to go through the entire lesson again. So we're going to divide 14x to the 4th divided by 2x. That's going to give us 7x cubed. Multiply that out. That's going to be -21x cubed. Change these to the opposite. Combine. That's going to be -7x cubed. Bring down the 24x squared. Gonna divide I'm sorry, this is 8. Let me fix that. So we can't divide that. This is an 8. Okay, now divide 8x cubed divided by 2x. That gives us, I'm sorry, -8x cubed. So that's minus 4x squared. Multiply that back out. That's going to be, let's see, -3, -4, that's plus 12x squared. Change these to the opposite and combine. That's 12x squared. Bring down that plus 2x. Divide this by 2x, that is plus 6x. It's going to be -18. Change these to the opposite. That's going to be 20x minus 29. I'm going to move this over here so I have more room. Okay, this divided by 2x is plus 10. That's going to be minus 30. Change to the opposite, combine, that gives me a remainder of 1. Let me just double check. Yep. Okay, so my answer is up here. I just need to deal with my remainder. I'm going to put that, just like we did before, in the numerator, and the original factor goes in the denominator. So this is the answer right here. And what this tells me again is that 2x minus 3 is not a factor of this polynomial here because I had a remainder. If I had a 0 remainder, then I would say yes, that is a factor of this polynomial. Okay, so let's look at the next one before we actually set it up. This one we're going to use long division again. I want you to look at the fact that there's an x to the third, an x squared. There is no x to the first power. So I'm going to have to put in a plus 0 x to the first power. Same thing here where I've got the 2x squared, but I don't have an x to the first power here. So I'll need to do the same thing here. So let's set this up. This is going to be 2x squared plus 0x minus 1. And then my 4x cubed minus 2x squared. And again, I need a plus 0x as a placeholder. Minus 3. Okay, and then we can start doing our division. This is going to be a 2x. That times that, 4x cubed. That's going to be plus 0x. And then that'll be minus 2x. Okay, let's change all these to the opposite. Negative 0x doesn't change anything, but let's see, that's going to be negative 2x squared. And that's plus 2x. And bring down that minus 3. Okay, that goes negative 1 times. Negative 1 times 0. And then negative 1 times negative 1. Change everything down here to the opposite. And combine, this is going to be 2x minus 5. No, that's a 1. Sorry about that. This should be a 1. Because negative 1 times negative 1 is 1. And then we change that to the negative. So it's going to be minus 4. Okay. So then my answer is 2x minus 1. And then this is my remainder. So that whole thing goes in the numerator. And then my original factor, or my original divisor, goes in the denominator. So again, this is not a factor of this. I would have to have gotten a remainder of 0 to say that this is a factor of this polynomial. Okay, let's look at this one and make sure we don't need any placeholders. I've got an x to the 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st constant, and same thing down here. This is linear, but the coefficient of x is not 1, so I need to use long division. Let's go ahead. I'm going to write this and then I'll come back to you. Okay, so I erased the original problem, so I'd have some room up here to put my answer. All right, so let's start with, I'm dividing 14x to the 4th divided by 2x. And that's going to be minus 7x cubed. Change to the opposite and combine, that's a 0. Look, if you don't get the same thing here that you have here, you did something wrong, because you've got to be able to cancel this thing out once you change it to the opposite. So that when I combine these, I get 2x cubed, bring down minus 11x squared. 2x cubed divided by 2x is plus x squared. Let's see, that's 2x cubed, x squared times negative 1 is minus 1x squared. Change to the opposite. Combine, that's going to be negative 10x squared. I might run out of room, might have to move over here a little. Okay, so I brought down my minus 11x. Let's divide negative 10x squared divided by 2x. Oh, I already put it up here, sorry. That's negative 5x. That's going to be negative 10x squared. Negative 5 times negative 1 is plus 5x. Change to the opposite. That is negative 16x. I'm going to write it over here because I'm running out of room. Negative 16x, and I would bring down the plus 8 if I had room down here. That divided by 2x is minus 8. Negative 8 times 2x. Negative 8 times negative 1. So then when I change these to the opposite and combine, this one cancels and this one cancels. What that means is I have a 0 remainder. So I don't have a fraction that I have to put out here. So that means 2x minus 1 is a factor of this polynomial right here. So what I would also know is that if I were to graph this polynomial, there would be a root at x equals 1/2. Okay, let's look at this one. I have my divisor, I have 4x minus 2, linear, x to the 1st, constant. But the dividend, I have an x cubed, and then I don't have a squared term, and I don't have an x to the first power term. So I would encourage you to pause your video and see if you can set this one up. We will have to use long division. See if you can set it up, put in your placeholders where they go. So this is what it should look like after you set it up. You have an x squared term and an x term that both need 0 placeholders. So I would encourage you to pause your video again and see if you can work through this one and then come back and see if you got it right. Okay, so I decided to start this back up at part of the way through this because at this point you have a 2x and then a minus 10, and you have to divide 2x divided by 4x. So I didn't want you to get that confused. You're not dividing 4 divided by 2, you're dividing 2 by 4. So you need a 1/2 here. And then 1/2 times 4x gives us that 2x, because we got to get the same thing in here that we have here so we can cancel it out. 1/2 times -2 is -1. Change these to the opposite. So I end up with a -9 as my remainder. So my answer is 2x squared plus x plus 1/2 minus 9 over 4x minus 2. Okay, so that does it for the long division. Let's move on to the synthetic division. So of course, synthetic division moves a lot faster than long division does. Just remember that when you've got your factor over here, you want to take the root. So take the opposite of this number. And that goes in your little corner there. And then make sure that you have all of your terms represented here. So we've got an x squared, an x to the first, and a constant. So everything's there. List your coefficients. Drop that first one down. Start multiplying and combining. You don't have to change these to the opposites here. You just combine them. -2, -6 is 12. When we combine these, we get 0. So we have a 0 remainder. This is our constant, and this is our x term. So our answer is x minus 6. What that means is that if I were to graph x squared minus 4x minus 12, I would have roots at -2 and at positive 6. X plus 2 times x minus 6 equals this trinomial. So these are the two factors of this trinomial. I would have roots at 6 and at -2. For number 8, it looks like we're missing an x squared term, so we would want to put a 0 x squared in here and make sure that we list that 0 coefficient when we write this out. Pause your video and see if you can set it up and then come back. So this is what it should look like. You've got your 0 placeholder here for the x squared term. Let's go ahead and work this one out. We'll start multiplying and combining. That's 0. 0 again. That's going to be 0. Combine those, it's 3. So 3 and a 2. This is my remainder. This is my constant term, my x, which I won't write, my x squared, I also won't write that, and my x cubed. So my answer is, I don't need these. If I get zeros here, I don't write those for my answer. My answer is going to be -5x cubed plus 3 plus 2 over x minus 1. So that means x minus 1 is not a factor of this polynomial. So if I were to graph this polynomial on Desmos or on my graphing calculator, I would not find an x-intercept at 1. Okay, pause your video again. Understand that there is going to be a 0 placeholder in my coefficients, so find that, go ahead and set it up and see if you can solve it, and then come back and see if you got it right. So I'm thinking probably somewhere along the way you thought to yourself, am I doing this right? Because you start getting these really big numbers, but yeah, this is correct. You want your 0 placeholder here for the x term, the x to the first term, and when you get to the end, you have 2,798 as your remainder, and then this is what the rest of it looks like. This is what number 10 looks like when you get your root and your coefficients. I got this really crooked line here that bothers me, but we're going to go with it. Okay, bring down your -1. Start multiplying. -3 times -1 is 3. Combine those, you get 0. -3 times 0 is 0. Combine here, you get 3. -3 times 3, -9. Combine, and that is -13. And then negative 3 times negative 13 is positive 39. Combine these two and you get 34. 34 is your remainder. This is your constant, your x squared, which you're not going to write because it's a 0, and your x cubed. So your answer, you would write negative x cubed plus 3x minus 13 plus 34 over x plus 3. Okay, I want you to see if you can do this one on your own, and I will tell you that there are some kind of big numbers in the hundreds on this one, and you will have a remainder. So this is what it should look like. One thing I just want to point out is that if you end up with a negative remainder, you want to put that as a minus. Don't put plus and then your negative up here. The way you would see it on an EOC or a final exam is minus and then the remainder there as a positive. Okay, we have one more to do. Okay, I'm going to work this one with you really quickly. We're going to put a negative 2 here. We have a negative 6x cubed. We do not have an x squared. So we have a 0 there. We do not have, we have an x term, so that's a negative 1. And then we do not have a constant term, so that's another 0. Bring down the negative 6. Negative 2 times negative 6 is 12. Combine those. Negative 2 times 12 is negative 24. Combine those. And negative 2 times negative 25 is 50. And combine those, and that's my remainder, my constant, my x, and my x squared. So my answer looks like this. So again, what that means is x plus 2 is not a factor of this polynomial. So if I were to graph this polynomial, I would not find a root at negative 2. All right, that'll do it for our long and synthetic division handout. I hope it helps. Let me know if you have any questions.